Why do you so often understand an event only after it has already shaped you? Why does clarity follow experience instead of guiding it in advance? This pattern appears repeatedly across human life. People understand relationships after they end, recognize personal limits after crossing them, and grasp the significance of decisions only once consequences are irreversible. Yet modern thinking is built on a very different assumption. We are taught that understanding should come first. Rational planning is expected to precede action, and insight is assumed to protect us from error. However, lived experience contradicts this expectation. Emotional reactions arise before conscious interpretation. Choices are often made under incomplete awareness. Meaning emerges later, sometimes much later. From a cognitive perspective, this is not accidental. Neuroscience consistently shows that perception, affect, and embodied response activate before reflective cognition. Conscious explanation is frequently retrospective, not anticipatory. The central claim explored in this lecture is precise. According to Ibn Arabi, understanding is structurally delayed by design. Reality discloses itself first. The intellect follows. This is not fatalism, nor a rejection of reason. It is a structural analysis of how cognition, perception, and meaning actually operate in contemporary psychological life. Delayed understanding is often experienced as failure. Many people live with chronic stress, driven by the need to figure everything out in advance. Uncertainty is treated as a threat rather than a condition of existence. Anxiety frequently arises not from events themselves, but from the inability to predict or mentally contain them ahead of time. Cognitive psychology describes this as an overvaluation of predictive thinking. Humans tend to overestimate how much control rational forecasting actually provides. Planning, explanation, and analysis create an illusion of mastery, even when real-time behavior is governed by faster, non-conscious systems. From a neuroscientific perspective, this illusion is easy to explain. The brain prioritizes speed over accuracy in immediate situations. Emotional and sensory systems activate milliseconds before the prefrontal regions associated with reflective reasoning. By the time conscious thought appears, the response has often already occurred. The practical consequence is subtle but damaging. People judge themselves harshly for not understanding sooner. Regret is framed as intellectual weakness rather than structural limitation. When understanding arrives late, it is treated as evidence of personal failure. But what if delayed understanding is not a flaw at all? What if it is a built-in feature of how knowledge unfolds? Ibn Arabi was not primarily concerned with emotional mysticism or symbolic poetry. He was a rigorous metaphysician focused on how knowledge appears in consciousness. One of his most important distinctions is between wuk, the occurrence of an event, and fam, the comprehension of it. These are not simultaneous. His central intellectual claim is clear. Reality discloses itself before it is conceptually grasped. Experience does not wait for understanding to authorize it. Understanding follows experience as an act of recognition. In this framework, the intellect is not the origin of meaning but its interpreter. This leads to a crucial epistemological position. Meaning is received, not manufactured. The intellect does not generate reality. It organizes what has already appeared. Knowledge, therefore, is not predictive mastery but retrospective coherence. Why does this matter? Because it reframes delayed insight as structurally inevitable. It removes moral judgment from late understanding. Instead of asking why clarity did not arrive sooner, Ibn Arabi invites a different question. What conditions are required for understanding to arrive at all? The first core principle is simple but often resisted. Events occur prior to their meaning. Sensory data, bodily reactions, and emotional responses arise immediately. Conceptual labeling comes later and is reconstructive rather than direct in cognitive science. This is described through bottom-up processing. Raw, sensory, and affective information flows upward before it is organized into concepts or narratives. Top-down interpretation, where beliefs, expectations, and models are applied, arrives afterward. This explains many familiar experiences. In moments of conflict, emotional reactions appear before reflective reasoning. Words are spoken before they are fully considered. In trauma research, individuals often report that they did not recognize an event as traumatic until long after it occurred. The experience was real, but its meaning was delayed. Ibn Arabi's insight aligns precisely with this structure. Understanding, in his view, is an echo of occurrence. Reality speaks first. The intellect responds later. Expecting understanding to precede experience is therefore a category error. It contradicts how cognition actually functions. The key takeaway is not that reflection is useless, but that its role is interpretive. Understanding does not lead reality. It follows it. If experience comes first, then meaning cannot be instant. Meaning unfolds over time. It requires contextual integration, comparison, and synthesis. Time allows patterns to emerge that are invisible in immediate proximity. Psychology supports this view through research on narrative, identity. Human beings do not experience their lives as finished stories. Meaning is constructed retrospectively as memories are reorganized and reinterpreted. Memory itself is not a static record, but an active, reconstructive process. This is why life decisions are often understood years later. A career choice that seemed confusing at the time may later appear formative. A loss initially experienced as disruption may later be recognized as These shifts do not imply earlier confusion. They reflect delayed coherence. Ibn Arabi explains this by arguing that meaning is relational, not embedded. Events are not meaningful in themselves. They acquire meaning through integration with consciousness over time. Until that integration occurs, events remain neutral occurrences. This addresses a common misconception. Late understanding is not confusion catching up to reality. It is coherence emerging when sufficient conditions are present. A third principle follows logically. The intellect interprets reality. It does not command it. Conscious reasoning often explains what has already happened rather than directing it in advance. Neuroscientific studies, including split brain research, illustrate this clearly. When actions are initiated by one neural system, the verbal, reasoning mind often constructs explanations afterward. The brain is remarkably skilled at rationalizing behavior post hoc, in everyday life. This appears when people justify decisions after emotional commitment or explain behavior only once outcomes are visible. The sense of control comes from explanation, not from actual command. Ibn Arabi's position is uncompromising here. Intellect follows disclosure. Knowledge arrives as recognition, not prediction. The role of the mind is to translate reality into intelligible form, not to orchestrate its unfolding. Understanding lags because its function is interpretive. Expecting it to lead is a misunderstanding of its role. Understanding requires temporal distance. Immediate proximity prevents perspective. When you are inside an event, you cannot see its structure clearly. Distance allows integration and synthesis. Cognitive science shows that memory consolidation requires time. Insights often emerge after periods of delay, sleep, or reduced cognitive pressure. This is not accidental. It reflects how neural systems stabilize information. Ibn Arabi treats time not as an obstacle to knowledge, but as its medium. Meaning stabilizes through duration. Without time, understanding cannot mature. This leads to an important implication. Expecting instant understanding is not simply unrealistic. It misunderstands the function of time itself. Time is not the enemy of clarity. It is its condition. If delayed understanding is structural, why does it feel like failure? Much of the answer lies in cultural conditioning. Intelligence is equated with foresight. Retrospection is often framed as weakness. Psychology identifies a related distortion known as hindsight bias. Once an outcome is known, the past appears more predictable than it actually was. Events feel obvious only after they have occurred. This creates the illusion that understanding should have arrived. Earlier, Ibn Arabi rejects this myth of anticipatory mastery. Knowledge, in his framework, is not domination of the future, but recognition of what has already disclosed itself. The corrective insight is subtle but powerful. Late understanding is not error correction. It is structural alignment between experience, time, and cognition. The practical implication is not passivity, but adjustment. One mental shift is crucial, replacing obsession with prediction by attention to integration. Instead of demanding immediate clarity, you allow understanding to mature. Reflective practices such as journaling function as cognitive consolidation tools. Delaying evaluation of emotional responses improves emotional regulation. Psychological research consistently shows that reduced urgency in interpretation lowers anxiety and improves decision-making over time. Behaviorally, this means acting responsibly without demanding full clarity. It means recognizing that wisdom is not the speed of insight, but the accuracy of recognition. Here, Ibn Arabi becomes deeply relevant. Understanding is not about arriving early. It is about arriving correctly. Understanding arrives late because it is structurally designed to. Experience precedes explanation. Meaning unfolds through time. The intellect interprets rather than commands. Late understanding is not a deficiency. It is how cognition, time, and reality cooperate. According to Ibn Arabi, clarity is not something you force through effort or prediction. It arrives when experience has fully disclosed itself. The task, then, is not to understand sooner, but to understand more accurately, and understanding finally arrives.